Chapter 5 of The Birth of Tragedy, or Hellenism and Pessimism by Friedrich Nietzsche, translated by William Hausmann. This LibriVox recording is in the public domain. 5. We now approach the real purpose of our investigation, which aims at acquiring a knowledge of the Dionyso-Apollonian genius and his artwork, or at least an anticipatory understanding of the mystery of the aforesaid union. Here we shall ask, first of all, where that new germ which subsequently developed into tragedy and dramatic dithyramb first makes itself perceptible in the Hellenic world. The ancients themselves supply the answer in symbolic form, when they place Homer and Archilochus as the forefathers and torchbearers of Greek poetry, side by side, on gems, sculptures, etc., in the sure conviction that only these two thoroughly original compeers, from whom a stream of fire flows over the whole of Greek posterity, should be taken into consideration. Homer, the aged dreamer sunk in himself, the type of the Apollonian naive artist, beholds now with astonishment the impassioned genius of the warlike votary of the Muses, Archilochus, violently tossed to and fro on the billows of existence, and modern aesthetics could only add by way of interpretation that here the, quote, objective, unquote, artist is confronted by the first, quote, subjective, unquote, artist. But this interpretation is of little service to us, because we know the subjective artist only as the poor artist, and in every type and elevation of art, we demand especially and first of all the conquest of the subjective, the redemption from the ego, and the cessation of every individual will and desire. Indeed, we find it impossible to believe in any truly artistic production, however insignificant, without objectivity, without pure, interestless contemplation. Hence, our aesthetics must first solve the problem as to how the, quote, lyrist, quote, is possible as an artist. He who, according to the experience of all ages, continually says, I, and sings off to us the entire chromatic scale of his passions and desires. This very Archilochus appalls us, alongside of Homer, by his cries of hatred and scorn, by the drunken outbursts of his desire. Is not just he, then, who has been called the first subjective artist, the non-artist proper? By whence, then, the reverence which was shown to him, the poet, in very remarkable utterances by the Delphic oracle itself, the focus of, quote, objective, end quote, art? Schiller has enlightened us concerning his poetic procedure by a psychological observation, inexplicable to himself, yet not apparently open to any objection. He acknowledges that as the preparatory state to the act of poetizing, he had not perhaps before him or within him a series of pictures with coordinate causality of thoughts, but rather a musical mood. Quote, the perception with me is at first without a clear and definite object. This forms itself later. A certain musical mood of mind precedes, and only after this does the poetical idea follow with me. End quote. Add to this the most important phenomenon of all ancient lyric poetry, the union, regarded everywhere as natural, of the lyrist with the musician, their very identity, indeed, compared with which our modern lyric poetry is like the statue of a god without a head. And we may now, on the basis of our metaphysics of aesthetics, set forth above, interpret the lyrist to ourselves as follows. As Dionysian artist, he is, in the first place, become altogether one with the primordial unity, its pain and contradiction, and he produces the copy of this primordial unity as music, granting that music has been correctly termed a repetition and a recast of the world. But now, under the Apollonian dream inspiration, this music again becomes visible to him as in a symbolic dream picture. The formless and intangible reflection of the primordial pain in music, with its redemption in appearance, then generates a second mirroring as a concrete symbol or example. The artist has already surrendered his subjectivity in the Dionysian process. The picture which now shows to him his oneness with the heart of the world is a dream scene, which embodies the primordial contradiction and primordial pain, together with the primordial joy of appearance. The I of the lyrist sounds, therefore, from the abyss of being. Its, quote, subjectivity, end quote, in the sense of the modern aesthetes, is a fiction. When Archilochus, the first lyrist of the Greeks, makes known both his mad love and his contempt to the daughters of Lycambes, it is not his passion which dances before us in orgiastic frenzy. We see Dionysus and the Maenads. We see the drunken reveler Archilochus sunk down to sleep, as Euripides depicts it in the Bacchae, the sleep on the high alpine pasture in the noonday sun. And now Apollo approaches and touches him with the laurel. The Dionysian musical enchantment of the sleeper now emits, as it were, picture sparks, lyrical poems, which in their highest development are called tragedies and dramatic dithyrambs. The plastic artist, as also the epic poet, who is related to him, is sunk in the pure contemplation of pictures. The Dionysian musician is, without any picture, himself just primordial pain, and primordial re-echoing thereof. The lyric genius is conscious of a world of pictures and symbols, growing out of the state of mystical self-abnegation and oneness, which has a coloring causality and velocity quite different from that of the world of the plastic artist and epic poet. While the latter lives in these pictures and only in them, with joyful satisfaction, and never grows tired of contemplating them with love, even in their minutest characters, while even the picture of the angry Achilles is to him but a picture, the angry expression of which he enjoys with the dream joy in appearance, so that, by this mirror of appearance, he is guarded against being unified and blending with his figures. The pictures of the lyrist, on the other hand, are nothing but his very self, and, as it were, only different projections of himself, on account of which he, as the moving center of this world, is entitled to say, I. Only, of course, this self is not the same as that of the waking, empirically real man, but the only verily existent and eternal self resting at the basis of things, by means of the images whereof the lyric genius sees through even to this basis of things. Now, let us suppose that he beholds himself also among these images as non-genius, i.e., his subject, the whole throng of subjective passions and impulses of the will directed to a definite object which appears real to him. If now it seems as if the lyric genius and the allied non-genius were one, and as if the former spoke that little word, I, of his own accord, this appearance will no longer be able to lead us astray, as it certainly led those astray who designated the lyrist as the subjective poet. In truth, Archilochus, the passionately inflamed, loving and hating man, is but a vision of the genius, who by this time is no longer Archilochus, but a genius of the world, who expresses his primordial pain symbolically in the figure of the man Archilochus, while the subjectively willing and desiring man, Archilochus, can never at any time be a poet. It is by no means necessary, however, that the lyrist should see nothing but the phenomenon of the man Archilochus before him as a reflection of eternal being. And tragedy shows how far the visionary world of the lyrist may depart from this phenomenon, to which, of course, it is most intimately related. Schopenhauer, who did not shut his eyes to the difficulty presented by the lyrist in the philosophical contemplation of art, thought he had found a way out of it, on which, however, I cannot accompany him, while he alone, in his profound metaphysics of music, held in his hands the means whereby this difficulty could be definitely removed, as I believe I have removed it here in his spirit and to his honor. In contrast to our view, he describes the peculiar nature of song as follows, from Welt aus Wille und Vorstellung 1, page 295. Quote, "It is the subject of the will, i.e., his own volition, which fills the consciousness of the singer, often as an unbound and satisfied desire, joy, but still more often as a restricted desire, grief, always as an emotion, a passion, or an agitated frame of mind. Besides this, however, and along with it, by the sight of surrounding nature, the singer becomes conscious of himself as the subject of pure, will-less knowing, the unbroken, blissful peace of which now appears, in contrast to the stress of desire which is always restricted and always needy. The feeling of this contrast, this alternation is really what the song as a whole expresses, and what principally constitutes the lyrical state of mind. In it, pure knowing comes to us, as it were, to deliver us from desire, and the stress thereof. We follow, but only for an instant. For desire, the remembrance of our personal ends, tears us anew from peaceful contemplation. Yet ever again the next beautiful surrounding in which the pure, will-less knowledge presents itself to us allures us away from desire. Therefore, in song and in the lyrical mood, desire, the personal interest of the ends, and the pure perception of the surrounding which presents itself, are wonderfully mingled with each other. Connections between them are sought for and imagined. The subjective disposition, the affection of the will, imparts its own hue to the contemplated surrounding, and conversely, the surroundings communicate the reflex of their color to the will. The true song is the expression of the whole of this mingled and divided state of mind." End quote. Who could fail to see in this description that lyric poetry is here characterized as an imperfectly attained art, which seldom and only, as it were, in leaps arrives at its goal, indeed as a semi-art, the essence of which is said to consist in this, that desire and pure contemplation, i.e., the unaesthetic and the aesthetic condition, are wonderfully mingled with each other. We maintain rather that this entire antithesis, according to which, as according to some standard of value, Schopenhauer too still classifies the arts, the antithesis between the subjective and the objective is quite out of place in aesthetics, inasmuch as the subject, i.e., the desiring individual who furthers his own egoistic ends, can be conceived only as the adversary, not as the origin of art. Insofar as the subject is the artist, however, he has already been released from his individual will, and has become, as it were, the medium, through which the one verily existent subject celebrates his redemption in appearance. For this one thing must above all be clear to us, to our humiliation and exaltation, that the entire comedy of art is not at all performed, say, for our betterment and culture, and that we are just as little the true authors of this art world. Rather, we may assume with regard to ourselves that its true author uses us as pictures and artistic projections, and that we have our highest dignity and our significance as works of art. For only as an aesthetic phenomenon is existence and the world eternally justified. While of course our consciousness of this, our specific significance, hardly differs from the kind of consciousness which the soldiers painted on canvas have of the battle represented thereon. Hence, all our knowledge of art is at bottom quite illusory. Because, as knowing persons, we are not one and identical with the being who, as the sole author and spectator of this comedy of art, prepares a perpetual entertainment for himself. Only insofar as the genius in the act of artistic production coalesces with this primordial artist of the world does he get a glimpse of the eternal essence of art. For in this state, he is in a marvelous manner like the weird picture of the fairy tale which can at will turn its eyes and behold itself. He is now at once subject and object, at once poet, actor, and spectator. End of Chapter 5. Recording by jvanstan, Savannah, Georgia.